So good morning, everyone. Very good to see you again. We've seen each other quite frequently over the past few weeks. First of all, in the Paris Games, then in Enoch 2 weeks ago in Portugal, and then very happy again to see all of you around. First of all, thank you very much for CACSO and the NOC of Panama for the invitation to present today. This is a great honor and privilege to be in front of you today and to make this presentation. I would also like to congratulate CACSO on this historic milestone that we've seen today with this anniversary, and this is a very, very important organization in the Olympic movement, the oldest association of NOCs in the Olympic movement. And of course, for the region, this organization is very, very important and very significant. So thank you very much for that. Thank you, Luis Maria. Thank you, Damaris Young. And also, I would like to thank the Director General of PAN Deportes, Miguel Ordenes, for helping also in the organization of this event. We had a very good discussion in Paris when we met for the first time together with the NOC of Panama. And it's a very good example to see this joint collaboration between government and the NOC, and this is a good example for the entire region. So thank you very much for the great work that you are doing together. So I'll give you a quite short presentation about the efforts that the IOC, with all the partners, of course, have been doing in promoting good governance within the Olympic movement, and how good governance can really transform sports organizations and have an impact in the results and in the development of these sports organizations. First of all, a quick reminder about the main pillars of the Olympic movement, starting with the IOC, the National Olympic Committees, which are recognized by the IOC, the international federations, which are also recognized by the IOC, and of course the national federations, which are affiliated to both the NOCs and their respective international federations. So this is to show that, the many interactions that we have in the Olympic movement between all these organizations, and the importance to work all together to improve good governance, because if anyone of us in the Olympic movement is affected by a governance problem or a reputational issue, then this is impacting the rest of the Olympic movement. So we need to work all together to improve the governance in sport. And of course, all our organizations are bound by the Olympic Charter, including the respect of the basic principles of good governance within the Olympic movement. And we need to unite our efforts to develop sport, implementing the basic principles of good governance, and all this in the interest of the athletes. We have been working at the IOC, for a long time about these good governance matters. And we started with Olympic Agenda 2020, followed by Olympic Agenda 2020 plus 5. That was immediately after President Barr was elected for his first term. He launched this idea to draft this Olympic agenda. And the question of good governance was a key element in the Olympic agenda. Just because, everybody has realized now that good governance is key for the, not only for the operations, but also for the reputation and credibility of the Olympic movement. And all stakeholders of the Olympic movement, as I mentioned before, including the IOC, the international federations, the national Olympic committees, and the national federations, have the duty to implement the basic principles of good governance. One important element that is of interest also is that autonomy and good governance are closely connected to each other, and this is basically the two faces of the same coin. And this is the reason also why we insist on the implementation of the principle of responsible autonomy, meaning that autonomy has to be deserved in the Olympic movement, and we cannot claim to be independent or to be autonomous in our organizations if we do not implement the basic principles of good governance. Just a little bit of background about the main initiatives that have been taken by the IOC. Good governance is not something that we have discovered yesterday in the Olympic movement. We started really working on that in 2006 and 2008 when we organized two seminars on autonomy and good governance, including the main stakeholders of the Olympic movement, of course IOC representatives, but also all the international sports federations at that time, representatives of NOCs, and we all met together to define for the first time the basic principles of good governance within the Olympic movement. And that was followed by the Olympic Congress in 2009 in Copenhagen, where for the first time these basic principles of good governance were fully adopted by the entire Olympic movement. And then, as I mentioned before, in 2014, we published Agenda 2020, including two recommendations, one on good governance and the other one on autonomy, because as I mentioned before, the two elements are closely connected to each other. Then in 2016, we created, and that was one of the results of Agenda 2020, we created an online governance tool for NOCs to help them implement on a concrete basis the basic principles of good governance and what it means for each one of the NOCs. We also created a template, which I will explain later on, to facilitate good collaboration between governments and national Olympic committees, because once again we believe that this is an important element of good governance, to have this close relationship between government and NOCs, national federations. Then in 2021, Olympic Agenda 2020+5 was published with again a recommendation about good governance. So this is to show that good governance is really an important element of everything which we have been doing at the IOC over the past 15 years. And then in 2022, 2 years ago, we have updated, because things are changing, things are evolving. So we needed to update the first edition of the basic principle of good governance, which we had published in 2009, and this needed to be updated. And we did that 2 years ago, and then we circulated these updated basic principles of good governance to all NOCs and the entire Olympic movement. So this is the updated document. Sorry, I forgot to, yeah. So that was before, yeah. Sorry, thank you, Damaris. So yeah, these are the basic universal principles of good governance, the updated version, which I strongly encourage you to read carefully. I mean, I'm sure that all of you have done that already, but I think it's very, very important, because this is not a very complicated document. This is quite simple and quite exhaustive in terms of covering the main elements of good governance. So 7 main pillars in this document. The first one about the vision, mission, and strategy of each sport organization that has to be clearly defined. Then a second pillar about what we call institutional governance. So this includes in particular the definition of clear rules and the statutes of each organization, which must be drafted in accordance with the Olympic Charter and for the national sports organizations like the NOCs and the national federations, taking into consideration the local laws in the country. Elements about the governing bodies, including making sure that the governing bodies of each sport organization reflect the diversity of the organization, include gender balance, athletes representation, and with a strong focus on diversity and inclusion. Also making sure that there is accountability and transparency in the governing bodies, with General Assembly being the highest decision-making body of the organization, and the Executive Board elected by the General Assembly being accountable to the General Assembly. There must be also democratic processes within the organization. For example, the documents should be circulated in advance of the meetings. The meetings should take place on a regular basis. Everybody should be able to express opinions, to exercise voting rights. There must be free and fair elections organized on a regular basis. It is 4 years, every 4 years, maximum every 4 years for the NOCs. Consideration of age limit, terms limit within our sports organizations, and when there is any dispute, the right to be heard, the right to appeal. So that's the main element of institutional governance. Then the third pillar about ethics and integrity standards. There must be some ethical principle that should be defined by each sports organization, based, if possible, on the IOC Code of Ethics. And for the most sophisticated sports organization, there can be these principles should be monitored by a compliance officer. I know it's not accessible for each one of the NOCs and the national sports federations, but at least for the most sophisticated organization, this should be done. Then an ethics commission should be established within our sports organization with a code of conduct, disciplinary processes, conflict of interest policy, being absolutely clear that anyone who has a conflict of interest must declare this conflict of interest and must abstain from being part of the decision-making process. Fight against corruption, against doping, against manipulation of competitions. There must be also a safeguarding policy in place to fight against any form of abuse and harassment in sport. You probably know that now we have a specific unit at the IOC which can help and provide assistance to each one of your NOCs to establish this safeguarding policy and to provide you with specific resources. Then the fourth pillar is about financial governance. There must be, of course, financial transparency and financial control, with, if possible, an internal control as a first step, and then an external control. You know that all NOCs now must have independent auditors, which should perform an annual financial audit of the organization. And then the audited financial statements must be approved by the General Assembly of each organization. We also have, for Olympic solidarity programs, we also have specific control programs of the use of the specific funding that is allocated to your respective NOCs. Then the fifth pillar is support to the athletes. You know that the athletes are, of course, at the center of all our priorities within the Olympic movement. So we need to make sure that the athletes' rights and responsibilities declaration is fully adopted by all the NOCs and all our sports organizations. We must make sure that the athletes are properly represented within the governing bodies of our sports organizations through an athletes commission. Everybody now, all NOCs must have an athletes commission. This is now mandatory in the Olympic Charter, which is not only on paper but obviously active. And there must be athletes representatives within the General Assembly of the NOCs and within the executive board now, at least 2 in the General Assembly and at least 1 athletes representative in the executive board. We have specific IOC guidelines for the NOC's Athletes Commission. And again, we are at your disposal to help you if necessary. We also have a specific subsidy now through the Olympic Solidarity programs to help you activate the Athletes Commission and support the work of the Athletes Commission. The 6th pillar is about solidarity, social and sustainable development through sports. So we need to be careful in the distribution of resources, and we need, of course, to have clear and transparent processes, but also think about solidarity and equity in the distribution of resources. There must be also a special attention given to sustainability and social development through sport, and there is a lot of effort now that is being done on this in line with the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals. And finally, the last pillar is what I mentioned before, is about the autonomy of the Olympic movement, but at the same time developing harmonious relations with government authorities and external partners. The autonomy of the Olympic movement is obviously a must, and we need to preserve our political neutrality. But at the same time, we need the support from the government, and we need to work all together with the government authorities in the countries. So we need to find this right balance, which is different from one country to another, but we need to find this good balance. Here we go. So just a little bit of context in our approach also with the NOCs when we speak about NOC governance, because we have, as you know, we have 206 IOC recognized NOCs across the 5 continents. And of course, we provide daily assistance to the NOCs to help them comply with the basic principles of good governance. But at the same time, we need to apply what we call the principle of unity in diversity, because we are facing many, many different situations, as you can imagine, with 206 national Olympic committees. So unity is compliance with the Olympic Charter and the basic principles of good governance, which is mandatory for everybody, all our organizations. But also diversity, understanding the specificities of each one of the 206 National Olympic Committees, and being flexible also in our approach and making sure that everybody can comply with the basic requirements, but then some NOCs can do more than others. But at least everybody should be able to comply with the basic principles of good governance. So as I said before, we have created in 2016 a specific governance platform for the NOCs, which is available on NOCnet, which is our extranet for the NOCs. So you all have an access to NOCnet. And we wanted to, because the basic principles of good governance is a quite generic document, but we wanted to be very concrete for the NOCs and provide specific tools which you can use on a daily basis to implement these basic principles of good governance, and also to undergo a self-evaluation to see exactly where you are in the implementation of these basic principles of good governance. And we receive, of course, the results of your self-evaluation if you proceed with this self-evaluation, and then we can identify together with you the gaps that need to be filled and how we can help improve your governance within your respective NOCs. We also work together with you on the NOC statutes with a regular revision process because, of course, governance is reflected in the NOC statutes, internal regulations and policies. So we're helping you with that, and there is really a joint work between you and us to make sure that you can reflect, of course, the minimum obligations of the Olympic Charter in your statutes, but also now these basic principles of good governance. And as you know, the NOC statutes are subject to approval by the IOC, so we need to work all together with this. A few elements to consider in your NOC statutes to reflect this good governance. First of all, your NOC statutes should include, should define clearly the legal status of your NOC in the country. Usually it is an association of federations of members that is registered according to the law on associations in the country. This is a non-government entity and not-for-profit organization. So this has to be defined in your respective statutes. There must be a clear commitment to comply with the Olympic Charter and, of course, the applicable laws in the country. The mission, objectives, role, and responsibilities of your NOC, as defined in the Olympic Charter, should also be clearly defined in the NOC statutes. The membership is, of course, an important element of the NOC statutes. You should have a list of eligible members explaining for each one of the category of members who can vote, who cannot vote. You can have voting members, non-voting members. There must be specific provisions relating to the qualification and application for membership. There must be also a clear definition of the rights and duties of the members and specific provisions about the termination of membership and disciplinary measures and processes to be taken when needed. Another important element, of course, is to define clearly the governing bodies of your NOC. Usually you have two main governing bodies. One is the General Assembly, again, which is the highest decision-making body of your organization, and the Executive Board that is elected by the General Assembly. The powers and responsibilities of the governing body should be also clearly defined, and as well as the rules for the meetings to define the frequency of the rules, sending notice for the meetings, definition of a quorum, decision-making processes, etc., etc. There must be also a clear election process for the EB members, including specific provisions about the eligibility conditions that should be also clearly defined. We also encourage the NOCs and each organization within the Olympic movement to consider terms limitations and age limit. We have a specific recommendation now in the new version of the basic principles of good governance on this. Also specific provisions to define how the vacancies which may arise in the organization should be filled. And then specific provisions about the powers and responsibilities of the office bearers, mainly the president, the vice president, secretary general, treasurer, etc., the main positions within the executive board. And then the question of whether the secretary general of the organization should be elected by the General Assembly, like the other members of the executive board, or appointed as a professional by the executive committee. We have the two options, and it depends on each one of your organization to decide how best to proceed. Then the NOC statutes should also include specific provisions about the NOC commissions and working groups, which you have to define depending on the needs. There must be an at least commission compliant with the IOC guidelines. There must be specific provisions about finance, including in particular the annual audit of the financial statements of the organization. There must be disputes resolution mechanism in place in your statutes to make sure that you can solve as much as possible your internal disputes amicably and through these mechanisms. And then a final provision about the primacy of the Olympic Charter in case of difference between the interpretation of the NOC statutes and the Olympic Charter. The Olympic Charter should always prevail. And also, of course, a specific provision about the IOC approval of your NOC statutes. Now, speaking, you remember my first slide about the interactions between all our organizations within the Olympic movement. An important element is of your membership, of course, is the national federations, because basically you are an association of national federations. And you need also to help your national federations to improve their internal governance, because if the core membership of your organization does not implement these basic principles of good governance, then of course this has a huge impact on your National Olympic Committee. So you need to work together with your national federations to help them improve their standards of good governance, and you need to do this also in close collaboration with the international federations, because they have also some responsibilities in making sure that their national federations operate according to these basic principles of good governance. So the specific tools that we have provided to the NOCs to help them implement these principles of good governance can also serve for the national federations, with some modifications, of course, depending on the specificities of the national federations. But this can be used as a tool that, and you can put this at the disposal of your national federations, which, again, of course, have also to comply with the rules of their respective international federations. So in brief, the NOCs, the international federations, and the national federations should coordinate their efforts and work closely together to promote good governance within the national federations. In case of conflict or problems with national federations, we also strongly encourage the NOCs to serve as facilitators to solve the problem, but together with the international federations, because as I mentioned at the beginning, the national federation is affiliated not only to the NOC, but also to the international federation. So a compromise solution needs to be found between the international federation and the National Olympic Committee. Just a few elements also about the specific issues that we may face. I mean, your NOCs may face in terms of institutional governance issues. So we, of course, help UNOCs, as you know, solving their institutional governance problems when they are faced with these kind of problems. First of all, it can be an internal governance issue within the organization, for example, between the members and the leadership, about the membership of the organization. This can be disputes related to the NOC elections, or this can be interference from government, which happens from time to time. So in all these cases, we are helping your NOCs and trying to find good solutions by mediation and amicable solutions in accordance with the Olympic Charter. And we coordinate also with the international federations whenever the dispute also is affecting a national federation. And if necessary, of course, we have from time to time to implement the measures and sanctions provided in the Olympic Charter. For example, this can lead to a suspension. You probably remember that recently we had to suspend the NOC of Guatemala, not against the NOC, but as a protective measure against external interference in the NOC election. So fortunately, the situation could be solved. But this is to show that, this is the very last step. Of course, we do not like to take these kind of actions, but when we have to, then we do it. I mentioned before this document that we have drafted as part of Olympic Agenda 2020, which is, in the spirit of supporting what we call responsible autonomy and good collaboration with government. We have created this reference document in 2016, which we circulated to all NOCs. And basically, the objective of this document is to provide a kind of template of good relations between the NOCs and government authorities, with the key principles for the NOCs to engage with their respective government authorities, but making sure also that the government respect the basic principles of autonomy and the roles and responsibilities of your respective NOCs. So this document defines this mutual respect for each one's role and responsibilities between the government and the NOCs. So this document can be used as a basis for discussion with your government, or even to sign a kind of cooperation agreement or MOU with the government to establish clearly who is doing what and who is responsible for what. So finally, just to show that good governance really transforms sports organizations. With good governance, you would have a better functioning of the organization. It's absolutely clear, and this has been proved. You would have obviously better results, not only in the sporting performance, but also in the performance of your organization, a better visibility. You would have trust from the athletes, from the members, especially the national federations, from external partners, and general public. There would be less conflict and disputes within the organization and with external partners, for example, with the government. There would be a better attractivity for UNOC, which means more funding, more means, more support provided by external partners, be it the government, the private sponsors, or even the IOC. And this would create a positive dynamic and a virtuous circle for the entire Olympic movement in the country. So the idea is basically to lead by example and then to be able to promote good governance for other organizations and for all the members. We will hear from Damaris later today about what has been done in Panama, and this is, I think, an excellent example of what can be done by joining forces with the national federations and encouraging the national federations also to implement the basic principles of good governance. And this has changed completely the organization in Panama. There is still work in progress, like everywhere. But this is a very, very good example. So you will hear from Damaris later today. So this concludes my presentation. And of course, I'm very happy to take any questions or any comments if you have some. Thank you very much. Any questions, comments? Yeah.
Morning to all. Thank you, Jerome, for the extensive and comprehensive delivery. I have at least 2 questions for you. Don't know how difficult they are. We're talking good governance. Of late, we have seen a specific trend of the IOC as it relates to a particular international federation and a particular sport, and subsequent communique to the NOCs. You said that it's a mandate of NOCs that they must have an athletes commission. How would the IOC view an athletes commission whose entire leadership is in voluntary, self-imposed exile, i.e., they claim to be members of an athletes commission, but they're all living outside of the country of that NOC? That's question number 1. And number 2, you spoke in terms of term limits as well as age limits. We know that the IOC had no choice after Salt Lake to conduct a comprehensive review and to come up with term limits and age retirement, which I believe is a good thing. How would the IOC view NOCs who have instituted term limits? Because some people, when they're on the outside, they always feel it's time for those on the inside to leave. So they have instituted term limits. But when they are on the inside and the term limits have come, they choose to change the constitution to remain on the inside. And finally, since we've seen a particular trend of the IOC, as I said, isn't it a good thing for the IOC to dictate as it relates to that term limits and age retirement? I thank you.
Thank you very much, Alfred. Always good questions that you raise. Thank you very much for that. I don't know how you do it, but every time you raise a very good question, so thank you very much. No, first of all, the athletes commissions. Yes, now this is mandatory for all NOCs, and again, we provide assistance not only at the establishment of the specific regulations for the Athletes Commission based on the IOC guidelines, but also financial assistance to help the NOCs support the Athletes Commission. Now, to the specific question about the Athletes Commissions that include athletes who are abroad, that's absolutely a good point. But now, with all the electronic means that we have, I think there are possibilities for the Athletes Commissions to meet on a regular basis, even if they are outside of the country, because most of them are training abroad. But they can still have these discussions through, online platforms that we, all of us now, we use on a regular basis. So I think this is, of course, not ideal, and I think you should find, in this case, a good balance between athletes who are living and based in the country and athletes who are based and training abroad. But it's, again, on a case-by-case basis. And this is what I mentioned before about the flexibility and the tailor-made approach that we always have with NOCs. I mean, our job is to try and understand your specific situations. And if we are confronted with this situation, I'm sure we can find a good solution together. But I think that the fact that they would be outside of the country would not prevent them from organizing regular meetings and discussions through online tools. On the second question, terms limit, age limit, yes, this is something, as I mentioned before, this is something that we've put now for the first time in the basic principles of good governance. This remains a recommendation. It's not an obligation. It's not in the Olympic Charter. It's not an obligation by the Olympic Charter, but this is a strong recommendation. As you mentioned, the IOC did it for itself a long time ago. Most of the international federations now do the same, and more NOCs do the same. So I think that this is an important element, and again, we have some flexibility in the approach. The recommendation that we've put in these basic principles of good governance is a maximum of 3 or 4 consecutive terms of 4 years in the same position, which gives quite a lot of flexibility. And the age limit is to be defined by each organization for itself, is between 70 and 75. So all this provides, I think, a sufficiently flexible framework for all the NOCs to consider this. Now, once it's clear that once you have established terms limit, age limit, then of course you should stick to this, because changing the rules last minute just before an election because the rules are no longer convenient is not clearly a principles of good governance. So this goes against our good governance approach. So that's why the NOCs need to think very, very carefully. And again, we are here to help and to advise as much as we can when implementing terms limit and age limit, because at the end of the day, this has to be respected. Unless, of course, there is a decision of the General Assembly at the end of the day to change the Constitution, but it's not good for the perception. It's not good at all in terms of good governance to change the rules just before an election. Did I miss something? Last question was? No? It's... Okay, so I've covered everything. Okay, fine. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yes. Hello? Yes. Jerome, please. I congratulate you for this very clear presentation. Okay. But on your first slide, you show a pictogram where there are good contact between the NOCs and the IOC, between the IOC and the IFs, between the NOCs and the NFs, and between the IF and the NF. But you show it clearly that the contact between the NOCs and the IF, they have a lack of contact on that. How come the IOC can help this contact? Because in our country, because I talk with a lot of other NOCs, president and general secretary, and we face what we name the zombie federations. That IF accept federations by letters without sometimes contact NOCs to know if this federation really exists. And the principle, sometimes they said, let's create the federations and we'll have the activity after. How come quit activities after having a federations? I think that activities will create the federations. And sometimes we have the fight, because Article 28 of the Charter said that we have to accept any federation that it recognized by the IF. How can you explain this? How can the IOC can be in the between us, can help us to resolve this kind of problem with the IF? Not only that, sometimes with the federations, having like the grant for the athletes, we have to follow the NF's rules, that means, or mostly the contact, that means what's the vision of the NOCs are about the athletes and the future games. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Hans, and that's also a very good and recurrent question that we're having from NOCs, from international federations as well. You are absolutely right. I mean, the link is missing in the Olympic Charter between the NOCs and the international federations, and that's why in my presentation I did not reflect this connection between the NOCs and the international federation, because legally speaking it does not exist in the Olympic Charter. But we need to see that from a practical perspective, and that's why we always encourage both the NOCs and the international federations to work closely together, because finally, again, the national federations are affiliated to the NOCs and to the international federations. So the NOC is based in the country, so they are supposed to know much more than anyone else the reality of the country, so they can advise and they should advise the international federations in terms of activities of the national federation, in terms of recognition, etc. When there is any problem affecting a national federation, the NOCs should report to the international federations, and the international federation should work together with the NOCs. So we are trying to promote this approach, which is not always easy and a success, but we continue to work on that, because we strongly believe that practically speaking, this is the only way the IFs and the NOCs should work together on that and find a compromise solution whenever there is a problem affecting a national federation. So we are pushing both sides to work together, and we're helping also making contact. I mean, I have a contact person in each one of the international federations dealing with the member federations, and whenever they need any assistance, I provide the contact details of the NOC. They speak to each other, and usually they find an appropriate solution. In some cases, they cannot find an appropriate solution. But this is something that we are really pushing for. And on the other side, when the NOCs inform us of a problem affecting a national federation, I make the contact and the link with international federations so that they can talk to each other and hopefully find a good solution. So this is, again, work in progress, but that's a very good point, because this is coming, in each and every discussion that I'm having with you, at least there are questions about these problems. So you're absolutely right.
Hello.
Yes.
First of all, I'd like to say congratulations on a well-delivered presentation. I was hoping that you would be able to share your presentation with us in soft copy. Is that possible?
Yes.
And also, can you include your email address with that? Because I think that you have a lot of insight and can advise member federations in a positive way with areas as it relates to good governance.
Yes, absolutely. No, we will circulate a copy of this presentation. No problem at all.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Chris? Yeah.
Gracias, Jerome. He decidido, are you okay? Tomar este turno por la intervención de Alfred Emmanuel. Alfred preguntó de un tema que es el dolor de cabeza cada 4 años de los comités olímpicos nacionales. Su respuesta es coherente, que el Comité Olímpico Internacional recomienda. Yo quiero sugerirle que el Comité Olímpico, y lo estoy haciendo consciente que soy miembro del Comité Olímpico Internacional, soy miembro IOC, debe ayudar a resolver ese problema que plantea Alfred y no recomendar, sino incluir esas limitaciones para los comités olímpicos nacionales. Conozco un caso reciente de este fin de semana de una federación que iba a hacer elecciones y si no hubiese estado en los estatutos iba a haber problema con esa elección que se iba a repetir. El presidente Thomas Bach, todo el mundo estuvo pendiente si él iba a cambiar la Carta Olímpica. Y todo el mundo decía que si él cambiaba la Carta Olímpica para él seguir en el COI, eso iba a motivar a que los demás lo hicieran en las federaciones y en eso. Jerome, hay que establecer los límites de edad y de mandato, pero no como recomendación. Porque como dijo Alfred, el que quiere seguir se agarra de cualquier palo. Y ahí es que vienen los problemas. Inclusive, levanto la mano para que esos límites sean inclusive para organismos como Centro, Caribe Sport. Es decir, hay que reglamentar las edades y el mandato. Se habla de 70 y 75 años. Inclusive soy de opinión que el 75 años es una edad promedio, porque los tiempos han cambiado. Pero les recomiendo que fijen un año. El movimiento tiene que tener una cabeza que decida. Si usted lo deja que se recomienda, van a haber muchos problemas. El 80% de los problemas que se dan en los comités olímpicos nacionales son por las elecciones. Y el 90% del problema es por la edad, es porque por continuar en el mandato. Concretamente, creo que ha llegado la hora de que el Comité Olímpico Internacional ponga claro el tema del límite de edad y de mandatos. Si uno puede estar 2, 3 o 4 mandatos, o 12 años como está el CO, y cuál es el límite de edad para la jubilación. No lo dejen a la recomendación. He cogido este turno porque el propósito como presidente de Centro Caribe es que esta cumbre no sea una cumbre más. Y a propósito, rogaría una explicación de cuál es el estatus o el futuro del boxeo. Como miembro COI, muchos comités me preguntan qué va a pasar con el boxeo, porque hay una que se fue, una que comenzó y no llegó, y ¡rian! Lo sacaron de Los Ángeles. ¿Desaparece el boxeo olímpico? Sé que usted, si hay una orientación sobre eso. Y una última pregunta para los miembros que están acá. El año próximo, nosotros, como COI, como Comité Olímpico Internacional, hemos aprobado los Juegos Olímpicos eSport, que serán en Arabia Saudita. Si tienes alguna información de orientación, de participación, si la tienes, sería bueno hacerlo. Si no, buscaremos la forma. Pero te pido, si tienes algún comentario sobre el tema de boxeo, porque mira lo que pasa con boxeo. Ahora hay comités olímpicos nacionales que tienen, ¿cómo se llama? Federaciones que están en un lado y que están en el otro. Y no se sabe, falta orientación. Muchas gracias, Jerome.
Thank you very much, Luis. Very good questions, of course, as well, and very important for the NOCs. First one, as I mentioned before, we believe in responsible organizations. We know that, it would be much easier to impose terms limit, age limit in the Olympic Charter. And to be honest, it would make my life and my job much easier if that would be an obligation. But for the time being, this is only a recommendation, but a strong recommendation. And this is something that we review every time we review the NOC statutes. I'm asking the NOCs at least to consider this option. In most of the cases, honestly, the NOCs, they agree and they include a specific provision about terms limitation and age limit in their constitution, in which case it becomes an obligation by them and they need to implement it. So that's the way we deal with that at the moment, but I totally agree with you that at some point it may become mandatory, in which case it will have to be included in the Olympic Charter. And this will be an amendment that would be proposed at the IOC session. But for the time being, again, this is not an obligation by the Olympic Charter, but a very strong recommendation. And practically speaking, we have more and more NOCs now. I'm having this discussion with each one of them when we review the statutes, saying, look, maybe you should, if you have not already considered age limit, term limits, then maybe you should do it now. And with this one-on-one discussion, usually it works. And most of the NOCs, they accept without any problem, because everybody has realized now that this is a very important element of good governance. And again, there is flexibility in implementing these limitations. So this is the situation as we are now. But I agree with you that, of course, at some point, it may become an obligation in the Olympic Charter. Why not? Why not? Second question about boxing. We sent a circular letter to all NOCs on the 1st of October, if I remember correctly, explaining the current situation with boxing. So I'm sure that all of you have received this communication. If not, let me know, because this is a key communication that is also very important for you now, because most of your NOCs now are having elections, so you need to be clear about the boxing federation, whether they are a member of your NOC, whether they can vote, whether they cannot vote, etc., etc. So we need to be absolutely clear on that. In this letter, we've made very clear that boxing, as we speak today, is no longer a sport on the program of the Olympic Games, and are not included in the LA sports program as we speak. So that's the situation now. Also, we made it clear in the letter that any national federation, National Boxing Federation, that is still affiliated with IBA has been de-recognized by the IOC, and this is a final decision which has been confirmed also by the courts in Switzerland. So any national boxing federation that is still affiliated with IBA should be removed from your NOC membership, meaning you cannot continue to deal with a national federation that belongs to an international federation that has been de-recognized by the IOC, because this is totally against the Olympic Charter. Now, we are hoping, and as you know, you have received presentations from another international federation that has been created for boxing. So we are hoping that if everything goes in the right direction, we can do something with this new international federation, hopefully beginning of next year, but there is absolutely no decision, no guarantee so far. So we are in this transition period. But what is absolutely clear is that, again, as we speak, boxing is not part of the LA sports program, so it cannot be considered as a sport on the program of the Olympic Games in your NOC, and any national federation that is still affiliated with IBA cannot be a member of your NOC anymore. So that's the situation now. Let me know if you have any specific questions, or if you want to discuss one-on-one on your specific, because it depends also on the statutes of your NOC. I mean, it depends whether you can include non-Olympic sports federations in your membership. So it's also a case-by-case approach. So let me know, we can discuss one-on-one after this session. And last point, Alfred, maybe before, or you want to speak about boxing?
You know what is boxing? I'm in the ring, but they said we must continue with the program. So we'll have that discussion privately.
Okay. Last question about e-sport. You have received a presentation by James McLeod, if you remember, 2 weeks ago at the ENOC General Assembly meeting. About this. So there is still quite a lot of uncertainty about, I mean, this is, the work is being done now, so we cannot communicate too much, but what is clear that already is that the participation will not be mandatory for the NOCs, at least for this first edition, and any participation, if there is any participation from players from your countries, then it will be through the NOC only. So that's the only thing that is, for the time being, quite sure. And in terms of timing, the first edition will probably take place in the last quarter of 25 next year, not